In the corona pandemic, a lot of people have lost their job, and many companies and stores had huge losses. First of all, I will name branches which have benefited from the COVID-19 pandemic and as well which have lost a lot. Companies which have made the most profit are online companies, such as Zoom, a meeting platform, and clothes stores. Furthermore, delivery companies such as postal services had no difficulties to survive because a lot of people bought clothes and food online. Last but not least, grocery stores benefited too, because at the beginning of the first lockdown, almost everyone was obsessed with toilet paper, flour, or disinfectant. There was a lot of panic buying, and not everyone got everything they wanted. On the other hand, there are many branches which have suffered a lot. Transportation companies such as airlines or local trains and buses had difficulties to survive. In the first place, there were only few passengers, and furthermore, airline companies had to refund their customers. Moreover, cultural institutions such as theaters, cinemas, museums, the ballet in Stuttgart couldn't open for a long time. Restaurants had to close because it was too difficult to respect hygiene concepts. Therefore, many restaurants offered delivery service, but this didn't always pay off. Traveling was not easy or allowed this year. That is why the tourist industry and hotels suffered a lot. They weren't allowed to host guests, and tourist offices couldn't offer trips either. For us students, the time was difficult too, because sport facilities were reduced and sport halls, gyms, and swimming pools were closed. Of course, the government tried to find solutions and tried to help the companies with financial support. I divide the pandemic into two phases, the first lockdown and the second lockdown. In the first lockdown, the government supported many sectors and groups, for example, families. Families got a child bonus, and parents without childcare got a compensation because a lot of schools were closed. Companies were guaranteed emergency aid and 50 billion euros. A group of people badly affected are students. While studying, they often have a job to pay for their everyday life, but the corona crisis has made their situation worse. They got a loan of about 650 euros. Some people got money for unemployment benefits from their local authorities. Last but not least, the government has lowered the value-added tax for everyone from 90% to 16%, and is planning to reduce the electricity costs a little in 2021 because everyone spends a lot of time at home. And they simplified the access to financial support to guarantee a basic standard of living. In the second lockdown in November, the shutdown businesses are getting 70% of their 2019 November income. But sometimes the money from the government isn't enough. This is the reason why a lot of businesses were creative and have found solutions to survive. Fitness studios offer online lessons, and business meetings are usually held online in form of a video conference. Restaurants are offering delivery service and pickup stations. Clothes stores have set up websites for customers to shop online. Another good idea is that stores, for example restaurants, have turned the restaurant into bakeries or grocery stores.
So, the Kurzarbeitergeld is a financial subsidy from the employment office to help employees to keep their job, and it partially compensates for the loss in income of many people. Companies can apply for it when they are in a difficult financial situation, like many of them are right now in the COVID-19 pandemic. So, as already said, the Kurzarbeitergeld helps employees to keep their jobs, and it also helps companies to not fire their whole staff. And it also helps with keeping the disruption of the economy as low as possible, and it basically sets the working life on hold, if that makes any sense. But who can apply for the Kurzarbeitergeld? So first of all the employees have to take holidays and work off the overtime. After that, they don't have to do anything because the companies then apply for it at the employment office. And at first, for the first half year, the Kurzarbeitergeld is somewhere in the ballpark of 60 to 70% of your salary, but the companies often contribute additional 20% on top.
In April of 2020, anti-corona demonstrations started popping up all over Germany, most notably in Berlin, Stuttgart, and Munich. Now the question is, who takes part? Well, of course there are the conspiracy theorists, who you would expect to take part. Or the right-wing extremists who are increasingly using these demonstrations as an outlet. But there are also independent business owners who are demonstrating here because they fear for their future under the new guidelines. Now, the question is, what are they demonstrating against? Lockdowns and mask mandates for one, which many of the participants feel will infringe on their basic rights. However, many people are simply demonstrating against the government because they do not agree with its current course of action. Now, why are they demonstrating against state measures? Well, there are the reasons you'd expect, like believing COVID-19 is a hoax. Then there are also heart-wrenching reasons, like being at risk of losing their livelihood if these measures are kept up for much longer. Or there are the downright ridiculous reasons, like believing the government is slowly turning Germany into dictatorship, where nobody can ever say their opinion ever again. Given that they're doing this on demonstrations, I don't think I need to explain why this is that ridiculous. Now, when talking about the anti-corona demonstrations, we have to talk about Querdenken 711. It's a group that was founded in Stuttgart, and it initiates most of the demonstrations. In my personal experience, they are very likely conspiracy theorists. One of the most prominent members is Michael Ballweg. He's the founder of the group, and recently ran for Lord Mayor in Stuttgart. Now, of course, there are also some lessons we learned during this crisis. One of them is that if you have the time and motivation, you can do everything you set your mind to. Or that caring about others isn't as difficult as it may seem at first. Or that everyone can be a hero, even if you stay in bed all day. But there are also negative lessons we have learned. We've learned that humanity is far too gullible, and sometimes too many people lack the empathy to care for everybody else. And sometimes selfishness can be our downfall. But I believe that if we all do our best to stop the spread of the virus, even if it means wearing a mask all day during school, then sooner rather than later, things will be back to normal again. And isn't that what we're all hoping for?
To ensure the safety of all citizens and to efficiently prevent spreading of corona, many safety measures have been installed in different countries. Since it is a human right in a democracy to uphold the right to vote, mail-in voting has been a very efficient safety measure to ensure that everyone can still use their vote and use their rights, but still social distance and therefore decrease the possibility of infection. Concerning grocery shopping, one of the most important points is wearing a mask and keeping a distance of 1.5 meters. Another thing is that others have to wait in front of the store so it doesn't get too crowded inside. But also many students are affected by the safety measures. In school, the most important thing is that it is mandatory to wear a mask on campus, which means during school hours as well, and that the school is divided into one-way streets, so you tend not to cross paths and therefore keep 1.5 meters distance. If you have been in contact with a positive tested person, or if you are positive tested yourself, then you must quarantine for 14 days. The state, after that, provides you 5 days after contact with a person to get a free corona test, which means you don't have to pay for it. But this does not eliminate quarantine, so you still have to quarantine for 14 days, even if your test is negative. The work life has also been influenced by safety measures. The most well-known one is home office, and this is very encouraged because that way the virus will not spread at all between coworkers. The pandemic has not only had an influence on safety measures, but also on the mental health and difficult personal situations of many people. Especially people in medical care have been heavily affected because no hospital visits are allowed, and even by families. So hospitalized persons are therefore very, very alone, and when they need some support, they can't get that because families are not allowed to visit. And that makes it very, very hard for them to get through this hard time in hospitalization. Senior residences have the same problem because visitors are only limited to 2 visitors a day. Especially for demented people, this safety measure is very, very hard because they do not get to see all of their family members every day, which can lead to more dementia. Since children and minors also have to limit their social contact, this has a negative effect on their psychological development because they cannot connect with as many people as they would like. They cannot get in contact with their friends, and that can be very hard for their future life and for the development as a person as well. Their development as personality traits may be slowed down because they are not in contact with as many children. Since the pandemic has also influenced our economy, small business owners and low-income individuals are now scared for their livelihood. This can cause depression, and because their livelihood is basically in danger because they have no more money.
Going to school during Corona has become more difficult, and the situation in Germany is complicated. We go to school normally right now, but with safety measures, of course. First of all, classes and grades aren't mixed. That means 11th graders only have classes with 11th graders, and for the younger students, they just have class with the same 20 to 30 people every single day. If a teacher is in quarantine, their classes switch to online school if possible because sometimes it doesn't fit the student's schedule. For example, there's no Wi-Fi at school and you don't have time to go home, so you can't take the online class. If a student is tested positive, everyone sitting next to them in class has to quarantine, but they don't need to take a test. We only switch to online school when enough people are in quarantine or the government tells us to. And the rules change a lot, which creates confusion and tension. For example, the first time we switched to online school, we had no idea what to expect the next day. There's a constant discussion going on whether online or in-person school is better for the students, so I'm going to compare the two options. Online is done with Microsoft Teams. Me and my peers find it harder to participate at time, and we often have technical problems. Also, the teachers struggle a lot. It also has an effect on our social life since we don't see as many people on a day-to-day basis. Since we don't write exams or tests, the exams have to be rescheduled, which leads to a very busy time when we switch back to normal school. There's less school in general, but online school does eliminate bigger crowds and slows the spread of the coronavirus. At school or like in normal school, masks are mandatory all the time and we have to sanitize the tables. But despite safety measures, there's a high risk of getting COVID. In general, we have to social distance inside and outside of the school, and the cafeteria is closed for the older students. So during lunch, they have to buy their food somewhere else or just bring lunch. There's less group work to slow the spread, and it is in general, most people find it easier to concentrate and follow class when we have normal school. So, in general, we have online school. It makes it safer, but it also makes it harder for the students and teachers. And going to normal school is less safe, but it feels familiar, especially because the German school system, every grade that we get counts into our final grade, so it just feels familiar. The virus has affected our life in many ways, so I asked some friends in my family what they missed the most. A common response was not being able to see friends because of social distancing and other rules. Another one was not being able to go to the theater because most culture facilities are closed at the moment, like ballets, cinemas, or theaters. Also, not being able to play as much sport or do as much sport as you could before Corona, because the rules make it hard for sports clubs. For example, the sports restaurants are closed and there's rules on how many people can play tennis on one court. And another big one was not being able to go out in groups. For example, only 2 people can go out together, and the bars and restaurants close earlier. Everyone has an individual experience with quarantine, but here are some common situations a lot of students go through. First of all, no motivation to learn for school. Looking at a screen the entire day can be very tiring and draining. Most people don't get enough exercise, whether it's because your room is too small or because you just can't bring up the motivation to go outside and exercise. Also, there's a lot less to no social interaction, which leads to a feeling of loneliness and sadness. During the entire pandemic, there's a tense feeling going around. For example, a friend's neighbor got the police called on her because she took out the trash although she was in quarantine. And at the grocery store, people get angry at you for keeping social distance rules or for not keeping them. Also, you miss school for 2 weeks when you go into quarantine, which is a major disadvantage if we're not doing online school at the moment, especially if you miss exams, and it just leads to a very stressful time, and it's very hard to catch up on the material you missed.